Welcome back to episode 2 of The Brass and the Truth. Today, our topic is the COVID vaccine reinstatement of U.S. service members kicked out for refusal to receive, and how the DoD has treated soldiers regarding vaccines over the past couple of years. Zach, anything else we want to talk about today?
Yes, and then we have an individual who posted on X a while back ago on their personal account called Stolen Valor, talking about how they requested personal information and the DoD had blocked those requests, even though they had requested through the FOIA.
So today, we're going to just jump right into it. It's the 21st of January, 2025. President Trump was just inaugurated. In his speech, he talked about the COVID vaccine and how they hope to reinstate members with full back pay. Today we want to talk about our experience as far as soldiers getting kicked out, the likelihood of them being reinstated, and how that looks or works. For me, I had soldiers refuse to get vaccines due to religious reasons, due to health reasons. But when it came down to COVID, there was a general protest within the ranks that I don't think was publicized very well. What's your take on refusing vaccines or getting them because it's line of duty?
So I would say for COVID-19 vaccine at the time, I honestly do not see the issue. I didn't see the issue in refusing it because of the fact it was, as we all know, it jumped through some of the red tape that every vaccine needed to go through. There was no 100% guarantee that it was safe, and as some of the reports that have come out the past couple of years, it was not 100% safe. Now, if it had gone through all the procedures that the vaccines and all the other shots that we got in the military when you first process or prior to deployments, yeah, I would agree you had to get the shot like any other one, but I definitely think there should have been some type of exemption for COVID-19 with the circumstances.
Yeah, I know at the time there was quite a stir because of that, but I saw it as one of those things where it's like I had never seen the implementation of a new vaccine on my end. So I don't think I had any frame of reference for adding to the list. I mean, tell me if you remember, but I think there was one day I got 6 vaccines in a row just because I either hadn't taken them in, a year, or they lost track of my record, but when it came down to adding to the list, it was just geographical locations. When I deployed to Korea, I had to get a couple extras, but never saw new ones come in.
Yeah, when I went through Bullock, I only had to get 3, but I had a peer in my class who I can't remember how many shots he did the first time, but within a couple of weeks of going through our training, he was informed that the medical team had lost all the records of the shots they gave him when we were doing our in processing. He had to go back and get every one of those shots again.
Right? And I bet he felt like absolute dog crap after, right?
Yeah, and that's not the first incident. It happens all the time in the military where it's not just medical, it's also admin, finance, and all that stuff. They lose a lot of documents, which is something that the military needs to crack down on. You can't just lose people's personal information like that so easily.
And I think that comes down to, a little bit of a human element, but some of it, I believe, is just a lack of enforcement.
It's
Um,
definitely both. And negligence.
oh yeah, because I've seen, I think our S1 would have stacks and stacks of paper, and I don't know if it's because they were undermanned or not supported by command structure, but when you drive an organization to wear too many hats, they're gonna drop the ball. When it comes to PII out like that, I think that helped me honestly avoid the shot for almost a year. My commander actually told me, look, you're gonna have to get it, or I'm gonna have to start the process for kicking you out.
Mm-hmm. I think my biggest problem with it was they told us it was optional at first. and if you didn't get it, you had to wear a mask and all this other stuff. And then all of a sudden, no, it's required. If you don't get it, you'll be separated within. I mean, how it was like 9 months or whatever it was. It was extremely short time compared to any other separation. But I always thought that was weird. It's like, okay, like, it's just why say that it was optional, let us wear the mask and all this other stuff, and now all of a sudden you're saying that it's forced on us to get it. But yeah, I had a couple officers in my battalion peers that were against it. One of it, he was just flat out against it. He never said his motivation. You can only speculate. But he got separated because he just did not want to get the shot. I remember talking to him about it. He was a good officer. He had a lot of potential. But it was because he didn't feel safe taking it. That individual, he felt the same way, but he got jacked and he fought against the system and he used religious exemption, which he said that was really the only way that he knew to avoid it. It delayed his ability to go to his next unit and everything, but ended up working out for him at the end of the day, though.
Yeah. So you say it worked out for him. He ended up getting out, or he ended up staying in?
He was able to stay in without having to get the vaccine because they gave him the religious exemption. It took a while, but he finally was able to go off to next duty station.
Yeah. Well, and maybe for a later episode that goes into when we approve and don't approve religious exemptions. I'd like to dive into that on, the use of facial hair, different uniform clothing items, etc. And again, for a later episode, but I had a similar case where, one of my warrant officers, he had a religious exemption for just about every vaccine he possibly could. He just, did not want to get any shots. And I think truly the service kept him because of the level of skill in his job that he retained. Nobody wanted to see or try to refill that slot as, he was CW5, unicorn man. Nobody wanted to kick out the unicorn. Zach, I want to transition a little bit. The article we're reading when we talk about this says Pentagon leaders have dismissed all of the claims that this hurt readiness, saying that morale was fine and that nobody was really upset about this and it didn't hit the numbers. What was your take?
Yeah, it's definitely not true. This shows the complete disconnection between those all the way up to the Pentagon to all of us who were at the lie units, because it definitely impacted the morale. There is without a doubt that you have a lot of individuals, even though we accepted the vaccine, felt disgruntled. And some of us saw friends who didn't want to get it and they were forced to be separated because they refused to take it. So it's just the DOD trying to, one, cover their ass, and two, one, accept responsibility, and three, refusing to acknowledge what is actually going on.
I mean, COVID mandates, whether the vaccine or the gathering, the wearing of the masks, the optional use, and I honestly think it created a subclass of soldier. I mean, I don't know about you, but it seemed like if you hadn't gotten it yet, your command looked at you. And I think I even remember one of the commanders saying to us lieutenants, the younger leaders, if you don't get this, you're presenting a bad example to your groups.
Yeah, that definitely happened in my case, and I imagine it happened with every single battalion in the Army. Either not probably directly from the battalion commander, but probably from the battalion XO or maybe the S3 or somebody. I said to all the officers that you have to get this because you're setting an example to everyone else. If you don't take it, you're a shitbag. Plain and simple. And they definitely did. It was basically a division, as we saw on the civilian side, where it was pro-COVID vaccine and anti-COVID-19 vaccine individuals. But in our case, it was those who got it and those who didn't. Now, obviously, within those who did, there is a division within there too, those who were for it and those who were against it. And the ones who are for it definitely look down on those who refuse to get it, and they definitely treated them as though they're shitbags, giving them probably the worst duty assignments that you could think of, details, etc. And just basically say, you're going to get out anyway, so who cares? I mean, that type of attitude. Wrong type of attitude. Toxic attitude. It basically just did not treat him like a human being.
Yeah, definitely saw that. Well, you're on the way out anyway attitude across a multitude of issues, but I think COVID was by far the worst as when it came to, well, okay then, get out, and turned people on, um, longtime service members, combat veterans, etc. People who had really put blood, sweat, and tears in it. And now we're looking at kicking people out with potentially dishonorable discharge or other than honorable for refusing to obey an order. And a lot of the commentary that I've seen surrounding the reinstatement was negative. People saying, well, they refused an order. Why should they get this or that? And I don't think people understand how those soldiers felt the DoD was turning on them.
Yeah, it definitely. I mean, first off, if you didn't serve, don't. My honest opinion, don't comment on this stuff because using a battalion commander who refused to get the vaccine because he didn't trust it, who happened to be at Campbell at the time I was there, Brad Miller, he said by the time that he had got to Campbell, he had just taken command and he had been in the military for about 19 years. He was just there at the retirement age. For those who didn't serve, you need to serve 20 years to be able to meet retirement eligibility. And before he can even get to 20 years, they separate him. And as I said, I remember the mandate that they read off to everybody from the DoD on those who refuse to get the vaccine. You will receive a other than honorable discharge if you're enlisted, and then I believe it was the officers will receive a dishonorable discharge. I think it was but I think it was actually like a case by case. I think it was more like a scare tactic, really, more than anything. But there definitely were some people who I would say did get some dishonorable discharge who probably served like 18 years, 17 years, whatever in the military. They should not have received this because they refused to take some vaccine shot. That it was, as Hesketh said not too long ago, it was experimental, and definitely was, despite what some people want to say. Jump through a lot of the hoops that every vaccine has to do because the government wanted to get something out there as soon as possible to ensure that the spread will stop and people things will go back to normal, all that stuff. So there definitely were some health concerns for not getting a vaccine. So there's especially for some of us who have been through it, it is kind of sensitive because of the fact that we see some of the people who were kicked out that should not have been kicked out. And you see the DoD, as I said earlier, trying to say nothing changed. It was perfectly fine. And as one of the articles published by our Army Times on the 14th of this month, you had half of 1%, which, that doesn't sound like a lot, but that is 8,000 individuals, as noted by Army Times. And with the current situation with recruitment, was it really worth it?
Well, and so I always wonder if anybody had really taken the time to really drill down on the legality of these things. I'm sure there were soldiers who attempted to fight through JAG, but in a later episode we can talk about rights of the soldier and the ability to really combat the legal beast versus just getting the stay quiet boot. Looking at some of these DoD instructions, and for those of you nerds out there, I will reference specifically DoD instruction 6205.02. We're talking about the DoD immunization program and some of the subsequent directives or instructions that follow. I think where they get their leg to stand on is that the policy states that active duty and reservists, are required to receive annual immunizations. This is in relation to specifically the flu vaccine, but it supports greater and other immunizations as well. The big thing I've seen within it is that these are expected to be FDA approved. There's not, that I can see at this point, anything that supports the use of non-approved unless you go into 6200.02 back in 2008, talking about the instruction on FDA rules, the Department of Defense Force Health Protection Programs. And this one specifically talks about, some of those non-FDA approved items. There is an allowance for using non-FDA approved vaccines. However, it shouldn't be an investigatory drug, of which I think COVID vaccines could definitely have been under the category. Without getting too legalese, I just think that there's a lot of questions for soldiers that were booted and for current service members about what are our rights to not get injected with something that we're not sure what it is, we're not sure how effective it is, and not getting read the riot act for having a little concern over our own bodies.
Yeah, and we already know that there were individuals that sued the government over the stuff. I mean, there was that well-known lawsuit by some Navy SEALs who were trying to combat against it that ultimately lost. If I remember right, a lot of them were saying it's a lawful order, you have to do it. That was the argument that was made by the judges and the military. It's a lawful order, you had to do it. And obviously, you couldn't really fight against the government because who was in charge at the time. I think with the government now being run by the Republican Party, even though Trump has said that he would reinstate those individuals, and let me read the exact quote that he said after he was given the oath of office: "I will reinstate any service member who were unjustly expelled from our military for objecting to the COVID vaccine mandate with full back pay." Even with that, I would imagine you'll probably have some individuals that would try to reopen some of their lawsuits or open up new ones, whatever, against certain individuals or the DOD or somebody. And it may have like a different outcome, but we definitely need to see what type of mandates are made by Trump and soon to be Secretary P. Hesketh. That's if he gets confirmed, but it pretty much looks like he will be. Um, and see what they say. Did they make any type of changes to Army regulations and all that stuff?
And I look forward to seeing some of it resolved because I do hope for some justice for some people, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
just not all that confident in it working out for everyone. I think there'll definitely be a case by case basis to this that will last many years, and we know how the DoD is about that.
Yeah, there, and we'll talk about an example of that as we said in the intro. But really quick, while we're still on it, there were exemptions for it, as noted by Army Times in their article. Those exemptions were medical issues and religious objections. I did know someone who had the religious objections. I did too. Even though without religious objections, though, it took a lot longer than I thought it should have been. It should have been religious objections. This is the reasons why. Here's the legal documents. Done. It shouldn't have taken the months that it did for some people. Medical issues. Both I have a friend that had and still does have medical issues, and it took him a long time to get the exemption. Now we can speak to him and see if he wants to come on the show and discuss it, or at least provide more information if he chooses to allow us to release that. But we'll leave it till we see Trump give the executive order or P. Hesketh give that order to be able to reinstate these individuals into the military.
I'd be excited to have him on. We always love having our friends catch up, and I think he'd have honestly a very interesting perspective on it as well because he worked with a lot of Air Force cats as well, and just getting a little outside view would be nice.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, I do want to transition into our second topic, which is is relevant to the reinstatement of people as well. But the inability of certain service members or former service members to obtain their records, has this affected you at all? Or have you seen this in your own current?
Yeah, we probably all know individuals while in the service or after the service where probably not in this case where they actually had their request denied, even though they done it through the FOIA. For those who don't know what the acronym is, it's the Freedom of Information Act. But definitely had a long wait. I definitely had a extremely long wait with some of my stuff while I was in the service, and even been told by lawyers that it should not have taken that long legally. But yeah, this does not shock me one bit that someone has experienced this with the DoD.
Yeah, I can tell you, honestly, getting a hold of anybody has been one of those things where it's difficult for me to reach back and get someone to even send me a copy of my DD-214, which should be, the easiest thing for people to do. I've got guys that work for me that, they are required to show their DD-214s to the VA based on, when they served, what their injuries were. Specifically, one who was in Ranger School in the Guard, and they did not have a separate DD-214. And for those that are listening that aren't aware, with Guard and Reserve Service, there's a continual starting and stopping of Title 10 service when it comes to longer stints of either training or deployments. So there's some complications to that, but all deployment records should include the discharge of those individuals back to their respective service. Now, this individual said that they fought him on whether or not he even served, and that would have been a chunk of his disability right there. So frustrating for sure.
If you want, you can read the actual post, and I can read the emails that the account posts to provide some little bit better feedback on that stuff.
Yeah, so from Stolen Valor on X at Stolen Valor 1, and I quote, "We've asked what this guidance is and who it came from, but have gotten nothing but silence. I played by the rules, waiting patiently for the Army to comply with federal FOIA laws, but my patience has been met with nothing but delays, excuses, bureaucratic silence, and evasion. It's clear they're refusing to adhere to the law without providing a legitimate reason. Left with no other options, I've had to go up the food chain. I've called in a favor from a well-placed friend with some pull to force compliance. It's unfortunate that I've been pushed to this point, but when an agency like the DoD refuses to obey federal law, sometimes you need those above them to remind them of their obligations. This isn't just about one request, it's about the transparency, accountability, and fundamental right to access information that should be public. It's time for those above the Army to force compliance and provide a damn good reason why they're flouting federal law." End quote. If you want to go through.
Yeah, along with that post, they attached some email exchanges they've had with HRC. One of them was, in every email with HRC or anybody, they have the legal applications and that they're legally allowed to do that. So that was one of the emails. But one of the things that they were told is the release of current and former military service members' military personnel records to third-party requesters have been put on hold. We are pending further guidance. Thank you again for your patience. The other one is talking about inconsistency with other agencies. They're requesting assistance. And then please treat this email as both an appeal and a formal request for detailed explanation regarding the decision to delay the processing of my FOIA request. That is a one piece of the email that they showed, so I'm going to take it. This is Stolen Valor emailing the individual they know, requesting the assistance. The other email that they got from HRC is, yes, the release of current and former military service members, military personnel records to third-party requesters have been put on hold pending further guidance. So you know a little bit more on the legal side, but my understanding is if given permission from an individual It's no different than being a lawyer. If you always have to request from your client, can you sign this document stating that I can request a FOIA, which is something that every time, whenever you're dealing with on the legal side of the military, and you have an attorney, they always have to do an FOIA. I'm not quite sure who handles the account at this point. It could be someone who is a lawyer. That's the only thing that makes sense to me. Just a quick thought. But if so, they're a lawyer and they're questioning FOIA and it's being denied or on and this wording on hold. There are some more legal repercussions, I would say, on the DoD.
Yeah, so I think when it comes to repercussions, there's not a whole lot that will happen to, different individuals. You get the move and shuffle, an adjustment to policy, but where we will really see things like this get cleaned up is through having a new Joint Chiefs, through cleaning up some of that upper management and putting the priority. From a legal aspect, it could tie up people for years, and that's not something anybody wants to hear. But whether it's battling the VA, whether it's battling one's own case for discharge classification, we've seen how long it can run, whether it be just from not getting back to the soldier in the same sense that this waiting game is being played. We don't have the transparency with the DoD that we do with other federal entities just due to the nature of the service, right? They can always claim that, for the good of the current service members, we can't release or make more available that, or that, the infrastructure is not supported to that, which is honestly a cruddy thing. But I think people need to realize that what we truly need to fix that is a culture change and not legal action will push it. But I think if Hegspeth means what he says, we'll see changes from just how Army leaders focus on training, and that will trickle down to how we treat and handle HR issues like this.
I felt like, yeah, I mean, it was bad when Trump had his first term in office in matters like this, where HRC or brigade or whoever lygag trying to provide information or whatever, or put stuff on the back burner that was for the betterment of a soldier or whatever. But I definitely feel like it got worse under Joe Biden. I don't know what your opinion is on that, but that's just my personal opinion. I feel like it doubled.
100%. I don't think people realize just how much that affects one person's life, though. And to think that there's, based on this post, it's very anonymous, and I do appreciate them remaining so. But imagine, they say we. How many others are there that are looking for their information?
Yeah, it sounds like plural. Yes, it is one of those things that it requires us to know more about. Obviously, even if we were to contact them personally, they will not provide that stuff to us. But I felt like it was something that it was needed to be talked about, not just because on this particular case. Don't think that this is an isolated incident for those who never served. I imagine any of y'all who did serve, you definitely have experienced either this personally or a friend in the service or whatever went through something like this. But this is something that has to stop. Just because a leader thinks some lieutenant or some sergeant major is a scumbag for committing some type of UCMJ or whatever, does that mean they can neglect them through having them wait months, even sometimes years, to go through the either the legal actually the whole entire legal proceedings. And I looked a lot at the regulations to see if there was any type of deadlines to any of this stuff. And unlike on the civilian side where there are deadlines to certain things, I did not see a single deadline for any type of legal actions that had to be taken. Now, it will say something like, well, they're being med-boarded. You had to have it done before the med-board team signs their documents or whatever. Or, stuff like that. But it's something like you have a year to have them go through the court martial or whatever. I didn't see stuff like that. Now, again, I wasn't a JAG or an MP to know that type of stuff. It's just me looking at the regulations. But I think that's something that needs to be fixed. I think you can't just have people just sit in limbo forever because you want them to suffer even more. It's inhumane, in my opinion.
Well, it's also inefficient. I mean, there's a certain level of waiting that I can understand. I can't pick up the phone every day and answer questions for every person that's ever interacted with me. But how inefficient is it to let it pile up to the degree that you have, so many service members requesting that they've moved to legal action? How many is, a queue, and how many is just a absolute failure to complete a duty to the service,
Mm-hmm.
So I don't
Yeah.
think we're quite at, public opinion towards Vietnam vets when they came back, but when it comes down to support of the veteran, I think we're on a downward trend that needs to be fixed.
Yeah. And I know the excuse that the DoD gives when on the legal side of things is that, well, we don't use civilian law. We have UCMJ. That is always the excuse. Yes, the DoD uses UCMJ. They don't use the legal law or any civilian law, stuff like that. But that does not mean you just blatantly just ignore somebody for months on end who's just going through an Article 15. Now, Article 15 should be over and done like that. It should only take, at most, my honest opinion, 6 months, maybe 9. I'll give you 9. But it shouldn't take a year or 2 years to go through the Article 15 proceedings. And that is there's no isolated incidents. That has happened before.
Yeah, well, in my own experience, the process for getting out of the military involved rebuttaling and, pushing back on the determination, because the initial determination was bleak. I mean, for a single incident versus, a number of years of solid career, I think the timeline should have taken 21 days based on the regs at the time to kick back a rebuttal, of which I did in, I think, 12. And then the following timeline was laid out by regulation, how long they had to respond. And that response should have taken at most 90 days. I sat for a year and a half waiting on a response from entities to review my record, to review my rebuttal, to ask for supporting documentation. And the crazy thing was, at the 12-day mark of my rebuttal process, it had been kicked back. I want to say 48 odd days. I'll go back and look at, but that kickback took longer, almost half the time of the whole process, and it was over a grammatical typo that someone else
Yeah.
did. It wasn't even mine. And
Mm-hmm.
and so I went in and I sent it to him because I fixed it in an instant. It took me with PDF 10 seconds to fix something that took, over a month to send back to me, and would not have, like, there was no legal reason that it couldn't have been fixed or amended or a note put in to say, here's this type. And it was the most anal retentive thing that had no bearing or effect on the language, that I think highlighted to me just how bad, if for me, just asking for a change of determination, not even change, but a reading of the determination the right way, blew my mind.
Yeah. I mean, before we close out, I mean, mine was very similar. And before I get into that, I feel a lot of the issues is because Army, and it's probably across the whole DoD, the legal team, they don't have enough freedom to be able to take some of these actions on their own. A lot of it they have to wait on the commander. The commander at the brigade level, battalion level, whoever it is, has to sign off on the stuff. It can take months sometimes for them to sign the stuff. And they should have some more liberty. This is something that we could get into a whole nother day. on what it's like going through the legal proceedings, because both of us have done it. Again, it's nothing severe or anything. It's nothing that would get you prison time or whatever. But as he said, his got kicked back because of a wording issue. Same thing would have in mind where the IO, the investigating officer, made some grammatical error too. It got kicked back. He made the correction within, I think, maybe a couple of weeks or whatever it was. Sent it out to brigade, and brigade took 3 months to send it up to division. 3 months, and it would have honestly taken longer if I had not said something to my JAG, because I was patiently trying to wait, be respectful and everything. And at a point, I'm like, what's going on? And I went to my JAG, and he called him, and he said, they forgot all about it. It's like, seriously? And yeah, I mean, that definitely wasn't the end of it. I had basically wait even longer to finally conclude the stuff. But there again, no one should go through something like that. It's just gross negligence. That these people are hired by the military to be JAG officers. Their whole job is to make sure things are done legally, and that if any soldier is faced with legal actions, whatever, the things are done right and all that stuff. And you just have someone that just somehow forget about packets, forget about soldiers, forget about officers that are going through the stuff. Like, really?
Absolutely, man. It continues to wonder and wow me even today. But I think just closing us out, this is something that I hope we can see change in our lifetime and in our commitment to doing this. I would hope for all of our fellow veterans out there that they understand that they're not alone in this issue, and that voices are being raised, and change will come when enough of us stand up and say, let's fix it. So I would like to encourage everyone out there. There is a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, and it may never get fixed. There may always be some issues, but that doesn't mean that we should just say it's a big bad wolf, we can't fight against them, whatever. Just continue fighting. If you honestly believe what you're fighting for is right, just keep doing it. If you think you're wrongfully mistreated by the military or anyone within the government, just keep on fighting it. Eventually, change does come. Change literally happens every 4 years. We had change yesterday, and they talk about change. So don't give up. Do what we're doing, trying to bring awareness to it, help other individuals join groups or whatever to try and take part in the cause.
Yeah. Well, again, thanks, man. I appreciate you inviting me to do this, and I hope we reached anyone or just brought some, voices to the cause. So that's all for today. Again, guys, leave comments if you want. We would be excited to talk to any and all of you about your story too.